Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the final of the employee appreciation seminars that we're holding. And this one is kind of a fun one for me. It's budgeting 101. So it's going to be pretty basic. I'm just going to start kind of with giving the basics of what you should look for when you're developing your own budget. And I'll get into some other things as some money saving tips and those kind of things that you can look at. The one thing with a budget, the first thing I can tell you, it has to be flexible. And that's one thing with a budget. You know how things change in life, things change in your money situation. Jobs change, you lose a job, have more kids, whatever it might be. So you have to be very flexible with the budget. It can't just be a stagnant thing that you keep month over month. It's one thing that you have to kind of review on a monthly basis just to make sure it still makes sense for your situation. Technical difficulties. Lexi, could you advance the slide for me? So first thing is, budget is a spending plan. It's not just for people who do not have enough money. It is for everyone who wants to ensure their money is enough. One of the things is with a budget is you're really tracking everything that you spend. You really want to know where your money is going every month. I heard a statistic that not many millionaires actually budget or have a budget in their lives. And it's hard for me to imagine a person that's a millionaire that's not keeping track of where their money is going. So it's one of those things that it's a nice tool if you have a budget to kind of really keep track of, is your money going to essential, non-essential, or just, where is it going? Is it going to that Starbucks every month or every week, I guess? So it's one of those things that's a spending plan. It's also what I like to say is it's something that has to be involved your whole family. Kind of what I've said in the past, when you're looking to spend money as a family, your family needs to be involved in your plan. Maybe not into the fine details of everything, but it is really nice to get family involved. For example, I do have some older kids in my house, and it's nice to be able to share with them, if they're asking to go on a trip, going to Disney World or something. They got to understand, what does their money situation look like right now? They also want cars in the near future, which they don't grow on trees. So it's one of those things we need to share with them, kind of some of the things. This is our plan. This is what we can do right now. Maybe we'll look at it in 6 months. So it's always good to kind of keep your family involved. And it can't just be one person in the household that does this. Really, my wife and I, she handles a lot of the bills for us, which is lucky for me. I used to, and she kind of took over, and which is kind of nice. It's a nice stressor, but she always keeps me involved of what's going on and kind of what her plan is. And, she says, Dustin, we're going to try to plan on paying this debt off in the next couple of months. She tells me exactly what the plan is, and I can agree or disagree or just support. So it's one of those things that we need to make sure that we're having those conversations in the house. And sometimes, again, like I said in some of my other talks, is that sometimes money is not talked about enough in a family. And it's always good to keep everybody in the loop. Unfortunately, money arguments are one of the leading causes of separation or divorce. It's true. It's one of those things, and I think, again, people just aren't comfortable talking about it, or there might be some hidden expenses that are coming out that the other person doesn't know about. So it's always best to make sure you're completely upfront. Again, just helping that whole family situation, that family unit. If you have created a budget, you know exactly how much money you have coming in and how much is going out. I do stress this to my kids all the time, that when we talk about, if I have a couple of them that are working right now, and when you have income and expenses and you're keeping track of everything, you really do know. There's a lot of people that I think live paycheck to paycheck, and there's a reason why for that, because maybe they don't have enough cash flow, they don't have enough income coming in where they can, successfully put some into savings. So again, it's basically coming down to income and expenses, and we're going to talk about income first because that's the incoming. So first slide on this one is income is your cash flow. And of course, there's many different ways of getting some income coming in, regular pay. So if you have a salary from your job, overtime, some people get overtime. It's nice if you can get some overtime, but the one thing with overtime, you can't count on overtime every week or every month. I worked with a lot of different individuals in my time here, and there's sometimes in the summer where people get a lot of overtime, and in the winter months they're either laid off or just working regular time. So the one thing that you really need to make sure is that when you are counting for overtime in your income, that you're kind of taking an average. The next thing is commissions and sales incentives, kind of the same thing. There's a lot of sales jobs out there. There's a lot of jobs that you get basic salary, and then you get some commissions or sales incentives. And there's some more heavily weighted on one or the other. So, but one thing is, even like I'm sure car dealers, I've never been in the car industry like that, but if you're a car salesman, there is a lot of, I'm sure, incentives that are gained. But there's also seasonality of buying cars. A lot of times in the winter, I'm sure that many of us don't want to be buying cars in December or January when it's 40 below. So again, I think there's those ups and downs of commissions and sales incentives. So we kind of need to use that when we plan our budget as well. Bonuses, if you're lucky enough to get a bonus, which is a great thing. Sometimes I always think of bonuses as extra. Just for myself, if there's a bonus that's included with my salary, I kind of use that as like, that's some gravy. That's some extra stuff that maybe I'm not going to account for that, because that could be something that we could be using for savings or for using to pay down some other debt. So if you can avoid putting your bonuses or estimate bonuses into your budget, I think it's kind of the best thing. A couple other things too: child support, alimony, spousal support, and that can be income or expenses depending on what side of the table you're sitting on. So again, if it's something that you are getting income from, child support or some type of spousal support, kind of remember to keep track of that and when that might end or when that might change, okay? Fortunately, I have a situation where I pay child support in, but as my kids get older, that diminishes and goes a little bit lower. So again, that's something that I always want to factor into my budget and look at that every year of when that might change. Really the only way to improve your cash flow or your income is basically increasing your income or decreasing expenses. So we're going to get into talking a little bit about that here in a second. One of the tips I have for you with income tax and when you're bringing in your paychecks every month, make sure you take a look at them. And are you taking full advantage of all those deductions and credits? I do run into a lot of folks that don't realize how many different things that they could be changing on their income tax just to change how things are done. A lot of people also get big income tax refunds, between January and April when they get their refunds back, and they use that as their savings tool, which is not a bad thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But a lot of people have really good intentions, and then it turns into where they get that, a couple $1,000s, and then it goes to a trip or if it goes to something else. So if you are truly using it for a savings tool, you have to make sure that you're putting it away. The other thing with cash flow and your income tax is if you are getting those big refunds and you don't want to, there is ways to change your withholdings, because maybe you're withholding too much, and maybe the cash flow throughout the year would be a better bet for you. I'm gonna, Lexi, if you could click on that for me. I just found this simple one. There's a lot of these things that are out there. This is just one that came out of US News, but it's basically just a web page I found that talks about the different tax breaks and deductions and credits that sometimes are highly missed. So childcare, summer camp, I'm not gonna run into all of these, but if you go out and Google search these, there's a lot of things out there. And if you feel like you're not taking full advantage of these, try to contact whoever does your taxes. Ask them to make sure that they're looking at it, or just ask for other advice. Again, a lot of website tools out there that you can use to make sure you're taking full advantage of those tax deductions. Most common one that I see is probably the child tax credit and that child independent care tax. So paying for that daycare. Luckily, I don't have daycare expenses anymore, but I don't also get to deduct it either. So, right. Move on to expenses. So of course, we all have expenses in life. Unfortunately, I wish we didn't, but we do. We all need a place to live. We need hopefully have vehicle or transportation. I suppose we can walk, but again, I wouldn't highly recommend that in winters in Bismarck. But so I break it down into two different types of expenses, and I do it into fixed and variable to start. So your fixed expenses, of course, are going to be your car payment. If you have to, get a car, or if you don't have money to pay for a car, which most of us don't have that up front. House, cell phone has kind of become a fixed expense. I don't know if I know of anybody in today's world as an adult that does not have some type of cell phone expense. Any other loan payments, all fixed expenses are going to be pretty much set every month. If your house payment's $1,200, your house payment is going to be $1,200 every month. Now, if you decide you want to put more on those, of course, that would be an increased expense. But if you can work it into your budget, I highly recommend it. A couple other things that I've seen that are pretty much fixed, usually are like a cable or internet. My Midco bill usually is about the same every month. If we rent some movies or something, it might change, but we're only talking a few dollars here and there. So we have those fixed expenses. The other one that we have is we have variable expenses. Now this can change, and it kind of depends. It's seasonal. There's a lot of different things that we go through in life throughout a year. I always use this example as a variable expense. If my wife says all of a sudden we're going to host Christmas this year, so now we're not traveling, we're basically going to have everything at our house. Well, a variable expense is going to be, well, I'm going to have to feed X number of people. And so I might have a lot more expenses around the holidays than I normally would have if we went somewhere else to be hosted at the holidays. So again, those things change. Utilities, that's a big one too. Unfortunately, I don't know, we don't seem to get much rain this summer at all, and my grass has pretty much turned to nothing. But if I wanted to water, it's very expensive. We know that. A lot of things have changed with how the city of Bismarck does water, and unfortunately, if you want to keep your grass looking nice without the rain, it's going to cost a lot of money to do so. So it's definitely one of those things that's a variable expense. But then in the wintertime, of course, when you're not watering, again, that's going to go down. So again, it's all about kind of planning and having that spending plan in mind. Groceries on a monthly basis. Hopefully that you can kind of have a budget of an estimate. But again, if you have some of those unexpected variables where you have the in-laws coming over, you might have some variable cost to that. I put gas in this one as a variable cost. And the reason I do this is gas prices, as we know, can fluctuate. Luckily, they've been low for quite a number of months now. And I think I saw it as low as $1.89, which is great. That's definitely a plus, especially if you're going to do any traveling in today's world, which most of us can't. But it is one of those things where it's really nice to be able, when I fill up my Toyota Tundra and I don't have to worry about spending $100 on gas when I can spend 60 or 70. It definitely affects your budget. I do an exercise usually with kids, high school kids, when I teach this class, and I kind of show them the fluctuations of gas prices. And I think I might even have a slide on that that I can show you and how much that can really affect your budget. The other thing I put in here is some unplanned and unnecessary expenses. So the one thing that I can tell you about these is unplanned expenses happen. Really, if you think about it, and this is a true story, I always kind of tell this one, but I remember it's probably, I think it was 2 years ago now, around Thanksgiving time, and I remember that our dryer went out. Okay, so our dryer in our house went out. Well, you can go purchase a dryer. Of course, you can $1,000, $1,500, I'm probably even up to $2,000. I don't even know these days. But can you have a dryer and a washer that don't match? I kind of argue that one with my wife sometimes, but I'll lose that every time. So when you have something like that goes out, now I'm also buying a washing machine too. So you have to buy a washing machine, a dryer. We're talking right around that Thanksgiving time. We're talking Christmas is right around the corner, holiday spending. It's an unplanned expense. It happens. It happens to all of us. The other one that I always think of as a big one that's an unplanned is what happens if your car breaks down, or you have a kid's car that breaks down. It's not getting any cheaper to take your car in now, especially with some of the electronics and technology that we have in our vehicles these days. I mean, kid you not, you could get a car. I mean, you basically could go in and it's $1,000 bill easy. So unplanned expenses do happen, and they happen all over. Another example is an unplanned medical. Unfortunately, people can get sick really quick, or a child can break an arm. So it's just how we figure that into our budget, and do we have savings to cover some of those things? Talk a little bit about unnecessary expenses. We all have our vices. We all have things we like to do for fun, and I'm not telling you can't do that, but you got to plan for it. We all like to take some trips. We might have hobbies that we like to do, but we just need to make sure that we are accounting for it. If we like Starbucks, great. If it fits in our budget and we can do it every day, that's terrific. Not all of us can do that. So it's basically just making sure that we kind of plan accordingly. And it's wants and needs. It all comes down to that. Your fixed expenses like your house and food and all that stuff is all stuff we need to survive. All those unnecessary of Starbucks or or those other things are stuff we like to have. I put this in here as kind of an interesting stat, and I think it holds pretty true, and it's probably grown over time. But 69% of individuals do not balance their checkbook, which I think it probably is even higher than that now. I took this stat, I think, about a year ago. 21% rarely do that, or really rarely balance their checkbook, and 10% faithfully do it. So there's that 10% that are always balancing their checkbook. I can say I don't balance a checkbook, but I'm on my account every day looking to see what my expenses are. So there's different ways to look at it. I know my kids are definitely not going to be in the mindset to ever balance when you have mobile apps and all those different things. So unnecessary expenses, I do share this one with a lot of younger adults. Sometimes when we get into financial trouble, there's those bank fees or overdraft fees that we can experience. Sometimes there are oops in our checking that we didn't balance, and it can happen. But one of the things that I have to, and I was actually talking to my daughter yesterday, and she made a comment that she has gotten an NSF fee before, but that's one of those unnecessary expenses. They do happen. But on average, banks will charge you $25 to $35 on NSF. And unfortunately, I see a lot of folks that have trouble money managing, and they have 3 to 10 of those a month. And if you can think about it, that's an unnecessary expense, because if we just balanced our accounts and kept track of what we were spending and how much we had in there, we could avoid those. And look at how much money we could save if we had a year of those. Okay. Luckily, credit unions are a little bit lower on that side. They range anywhere from 18 to 30. These are just some national averages that I pulled. But so again, all unnecessary things that we could hopefully try to avoid. I have a nice quote on here too: spend what you need, save what you can. You can never save enough. I can tell you that. I think there's not a person that gets to a retirement age and says, God, I wish I would have not had as much in savings, because really you're going to need as much as you can get. So, all right, we'll move on to the next one. This was the chart I was talking about. This is the price changes in your budget, and this is just gas prices. And I only have it updated up to 2018, but just to give you kind of an example of a price change with gas price and the fluctuations that we experience. Back in 2012, where looks like an all-time high there that I can remember, and gas prices were expensive. Even in 2019, they were up to $2.72. Now 2020, around that $1.99 mark. So again, how much can that really fluctuate? Well, you do the math, and I challenge you to do this, but just figure out how much you're spending in gas and how many times you're filling. So for example, if you're filling up a 20-gallon tank at $2.72, you're going to be spending about $55. At $2 a gallon, or at $2 a gallon for 20, it's about 39. It seems small. It's only $14, but let's say you're doing that twice a month. There's 28. But then think of it if you take it over the whole year, how much difference in price that is. So again, just those small changes in gas prices can definitely affect your budget. And a person living paycheck to paycheck is really going to feel that. So just keep that in mind. I put in some expense reduction tips that I've kind of found, and these are just some of my personal experiences that I've had. But there's a lot of expense reductions that we can find. And at the very end, I'll share some other ones. But one of the things that we have a tough decision to make as we get to be adults we have either owning or renting. Now, there's so many different views on what's better, and I don't know if I have one. It's kind of personal preference of what you like, because they say if you rent, you're just throwing money out the door. Well, but there's some people that just don't want to own a home, because there is a lot of, if you think about it, look at how many costs are involved with owning a home. My nephew just purchased a home this summer, and just got married and starting life, and it's kind of fun to see him to do this as see him grow up. But one of the things you don't realize when you buy a house, well, what do you need when you buy a house? Okay, now you probably need a lawnmower, unless you're going to hire that out. Most of us can't. You need hoses. You need supplies for around the house. Vacuum cleaner. You need all those different things that you think of, and of course you need a vacuum when you rent too. But it's some of those things that we just don't even think about. Okay, so owning a home is very expensive. Things break. With renting, of course, if things break, hopefully it's covered by the landlord. So again, it's and there's just some young adults that would rather not settle down. They like to move around quite frequently. So again, it all comes down to personal preference. I like it that I have a house and we're building equity, and hopefully that equity then will roll into our forever home when we're ready to retire. So that's my personal goal, but you have to figure out what your goal is. Yes, there's definitely tax benefits, of course, to mortgage interest deductions and some PMI deductions, property taxes, all those types of things. But again, those are all other expenses we're paying that we wouldn't necessarily have with some of that rent cost. Mechanical, utilities, insurance costs, upkeep. Again, all different things that fit right into those housing costs. I always feel renting is less commitment to, because again, like I said, some of those young adults really like to be able to move around. So insurance premiums, buying insurance wisely. I've definitely learned this over the last 20 years. There's definitely a good thing to be pricing out your insurance, especially on like a homeowner's or a car insurance. There's so many different places that you can go to and check out. It's not, the relationships with your, if you have a person that you get to go to and talk to is great. And sometimes that makes a world of difference. I can tell you from experience, I've went to an online company a couple years ago for insurance, and I've had the best service and my costs went down tremendous. And you know what? I don't need a person. If I do need to call, I can call. They have online sites that I can go to. Again, but I save so much money and I get the same coverage. So again, but it's all personal preference, all choices that you have to make. A couple other things to reduce some of your costs in your budget on your expenses is looking at some simple things like programmable thermostat, or tough time saying that word. But one of the things is when we're all at work, my wife and I are at work, the kids are hopefully in school, and I have just my cats and my dog at home. I don't really need to keep the house at a too comfortable level. So in the wintertime, I might drop the heat down just a little bit. You wouldn't believe how much that can really save you, because we know how cold winters get in North Dakota and how much times we have to run the heat or we have to run the air when it's 90 degrees out. But again, doing some of those little things and programming it or having it go down at night can definitely save you a lot of money. There is even some options with an MDU, especially I think they have some balanced billing options where you can kind of average out and pay that way. It's again, what works for you and how you can fit that into your budget. Also, our kitchen fans are a good thing. Good insulation, electricity. I always tell the kids, dang it, turn off those lights. You don't need to have the lights on, or turn off the TV. So some of those simple things that we take for granted, but again, they all come to cost savings. Even some of the things that they make in some of the appliances these days where they're so energy efficient, you can believe how much that can definitely save you. I put renting storage units on here because at one time in my life I had a storage unit. And it's funny, you always kind of think of it, why do I have a storage unit? Well, because I'm storing my stuff, right? And one of the things is, if you're not visiting your storage unit once every 6 months, if you're doing it, if it's once a year you're going there, do you really need to have it? Because is it the stuff you really need to keep? And then I remember when I cleaned my storage unit out, this is years ago, everything in there, I bet 80% of it was junk and I was able to throw it all away. So again, I was paying monthly to store stuff that I wasn't going to keep anyways. Okay, so if you have a storage unit, if you need to, there's people that do classic cars and all that kind of stuff, you need to have that. But kind of just take a step back and think, what do I have in my storage unit? Do I really need to keep it all? So just some tips that I've come up with in my time. So last one I have on here is don't be afraid to negotiate items. It's one of those things where, and I always throw out Mid-Continent as one, and not offending anybody that works at Mid-Continent, but it's expensive. Cable is very expensive. And I know a lot of people I work with, they decided to basically, they call it cut the cable. They're not going to buy that anymore. And they're going to go to more of a Netflix or Amazon, Hulu, all those different options. It's definitely a cheaper option. I'm a big Twins fan. I like to get my cable so I can watch my Twins games. So that's probably one of the main reasons I keep it. But it's one of those things that don't be afraid to negotiate your prices. One of the things is Mid-Continent always gives specials. Don't be afraid to ask. I've been a client or a customer for so long. Is there any other better deals that I can get? And they might have even just some slight discounts they could give you, even if it's for a 6-month period or a year. Especially if you're planning on leaving the place. Hopefully they're going to keep you around. Another one I get a kick out of. For any of you that are into Sirius, like XM radio, the service you can buy for vehicles and things, I get a kick out of them, and I can maybe pick on them a little bit more because they're more national. But tell you what, every time I call in that's saying I'm going to cancel that thing, they're basically saying, well, I can give you a deal now for 99 cents for 6 months or whatever it is. Just probably exaggerating that number, but it's true. Really, they don't want to lose your business. So really, they're going to try to keep you around a little longer. I remember when I had purchased my new truck back in June, and I got a free trial of it, and then basically called, after 3 months or whatever and said, I'm just not going to use it enough. I'll just cancel it. They were able to give me a deal, so I have another deal going for another year. So again, don't be afraid to negotiate. There is, there's some places that, of course, that won't, but I don't know. It's some of those things that you have to just be brave and do. So it might save you some money in the long run. All right, some other quick ones that I have for expense reductions would be some transportation decisions. What kind of vehicle you buy, of course, is going to be to make or break you in some cases. I know my daughter right now is 18. She has a vehicle now, but she's looking to upgrade. And so we've been kind of been helping her shop around a little bit, and ended up going to the dealership on Saturday, and we looked at a couple different options. But, deciding on what price you want to pay for that vehicle. If you have the money and you can pay cash, great. Again, most people that I've seen cannot do that. They have to get some type of auto loan. So it all comes down to decisions. Do we want to buy that $60,000, $70,000 truck that are out there, or could we settle for a used vehicle at $20,000 or $25,000? Okay. I always say that, your vehicle gets you from point A to point B, and that's true. I mean, it really gets you to where you need to go. There's luxury items and stuff that you can get added, and those are great. But if it doesn't fit in your budget, you might want to reconsider. I do help a lot of people with credit counseling and doing some of those things, and those tough decisions come out where if you're living beyond your means and you have 2 brand new vehicles, maybe it's a point where, you maybe need to sell those and get down to something a little bit more reasonable. Again, some of those bigger vehicles too are those auto insurance premiums are going to be really high. So I was, again, talking to my 18-year-old daughter. She's looking at a small SUV. If she goes into an SUV, I know her insurance premiums are going to go up. But if she went into a 4-door sedan of some kind, it would probably be about the same. So, it's all about those choices and what in this case, what she can afford for an insurance increase. So the other thing too, you always want to look at too, is when you're buying auto loans, and I always throw this one out there too, make sure you understand the deal that you're getting. There's so many different, things and stuff that can throw at you, especially when you're buying a car. 0% for 60 months, or they're going to give you a rebate. Make sure you do your homework on that, because there's a lot of times where if you take the rebate up front on that brand new vehicle and then just finance it either with a credit union or another financial with a good interest rate, you're actually going to come out ahead, because you're going to have that much less in finance, and over time it's going to cost you less in the end. So again, those are some tips I have for you, because it can make a big difference. Doing more with less, stop borrowing if you can. I always say, there's a lot of experts out there, let's say, that they say never borrow anything. I'd love to believe that that's true. At my stage of life, unfortunately, I have to borrow money. I have, still 4 kids living at the house, 1 in college. And so, it's just not a point where I can stop borrowing. If you can, that's great. Another tip is leave your credit cards at home when you're out shopping. If you can not use your credit cards, again, that's the best way to do it, because if you're paying with cash or using your debit card, you're not racking up that credit card debt. Cut back on eating out. I don't know how many times I have to talk to my kids about this. Dad, can we eat out? Can we eat out tonight? I'm like, no, we have food in the house. So it's one of those things. It's a nice luxury to do every once in a while, but to do it, every few days or something like that, there's a lot of us that can't afford that. And again, it all comes down to tracking what we have for expenses. So those are some expense reductions. We'll move on to the next one, where I talk a little bit about savings plans. I always put savings as an expense. And the reason I do that is because you should always pay yourself first. I read something just recently where they talk about how much you should kind of allocate for different things in your budget. And it talked about 50% of your income should go to essentials. So the things we've talked about, the house, maybe the car payment, stuff that you really need to have. 30% to non-essentials. You need clothing and food, and well, you need food for essentials too, but eating out maybe would fall into that. But then 20% of your income should actually go to savings. So again, 50% essential, 30% non-essential, and 20% to your savings. Can we all say we're saving 20% of our paychecks? I would have to agree on that. I just can't at this point in my life. So eventually I'd love to, but it's so important to save. And why do we do that? Well, some of those things that we talked about before, when you have those unplanned expenses, when you have that washing machine or dryer that goes out and you need to purchase it, or anything that happens, my daughter gets a broken arm, all of those different things, we need to have savings. Because what happens if we don't have savings? And I try to explain this to a lot of the younger adults that I talk to. If we don't have savings, we're forced to go into credit cards, and that could just snowball. The one thing I like to talk a little bit about too is with a savings plan, especially when teaching kids, this is hard, and even for some adults. But you have to have a goal in mind, because if I tell my 14 or 15-year-old daughter that I want you to save some money. Well, what is the goal? Why am I saving money, Dad? Well, right now I want you to save because I want you to put a portion towards a car. So, setting those goals in mind, I think is key. And then when you talk to, adults, hopefully long-term savings means you're saving for retirement, you're saving for that retirement home, that motor home you might want to live in when you get older, and travel the world or whatever you end up wanting to do. But again, having those goals in mind, I know my wife and I have kind of a motorhome fund. That's our goal. When we retire, we want to get one and we want to travel. So again, everybody has different goals. What is yours? And that's what you really have to kind of think about. It's always good to have at least 3 to 6 months of income set aside for some of that emergency. So really, if you think about it, then take what you get for household income, if it's you and your spouse or whoever, basically make sure you're putting that aside for emergency. And then maybe you put other savings, if you can afford to, put it away for that motorhome fund or vacation or whatever you want to do. The other thing too is we want to try to help our kids with college. And it's one of those things that college is getting very expensive. And there's been different things that I've heard over time where it's better to put your money into retirement and not give the money to the kids for college. And I don't know. I think that comes down to preference. Student loans are very inexpensive. There's some tax deductions there. So I guess it all comes down to there's also different expenses that come along with college, school books, and room and board, all that kind of stuff. So there's things you can do to help, but there's also a way to allow them to get those student loans and, kind of build some credit and kind of learn some responsibility. Other kind of things I always talk about is too, if it's coming if they have some skin in the game with their college education, they know it's their own money. They know they're going to work that much harder because they have some buy-in to it. Make savings a habit. That's one thing that you need to do that. And I think you need to start kids, especially at a young age. You don't get them started right away. You know how easy it is to dip into savings. It's funny because I have, again, 2 daughters at the house that are 14 and 15-year-olds. And I have one that my 14-year-old, she's kind of going on 20. She is so good at saving. She does her own little Etsy business. Gotta put a plug in for her for that. But she is doing really well for herself, and she's safe. She's got her own special savings that she's put away her money when she makes money. And then I have my other daughter, and I love her to death, but she can't save a penny. And as soon as she gets her paycheck, it's going to things. Again, 2 different things. I try to teach them the exact same way, but sometimes it's very difficult. We all live different ways. I have a website I attached here. I'm going to have them bring it up here, but this is dinkytown.net. This is a website that I've used since I've been at the credit union in my 20 years. If you scroll down for me, Lexi. So these are some very good calculators. So I use this when I'm kind of teaching folks about savings, especially if we click on the savings calculator there. Scroll down just a little bit. There is so many different savings calculators out here that can help. Either if you're trying to have teach yourself how to save, teach your kids, whatever it might be, or if you're saving for a certain thing, there's definitely some really good tools out here. But not just savings calculators. This website has so many other different calculators. Buying versus renting is another one. There's some different things on investments, retirement savings, even loans, house loans, that kind of stuff too. So we'll have this attached and we can send this out after the presentation today, but I definitely say take a look at it. Or if you have kids at the home, share it with them. When I share some of these savings calculators with some high school students and show them how much, if they just save this much every month over 5 years how much they have. And sometimes they're just like, wow, I didn't even understand that. So just teaching them the value of the dollar, I think is huge. All right, let's go back here. All right, so we're gonna move on to the next one. So now we're gonna kind of get into building a personal budget and what goes into it. So one of the things I always talk about first is that you want to make sure that you're kind of planning ahead. You can't just go ahead and go into a budget the first month you want to start. You got to really look back and track some of your expenses. If you have all that stuff available to you, if you have your income and expenses for the last 6 months, great. Not all of us keep track of all those things, so maybe it's where we have to do a little homework first. So basically, I always say track all your income, all your expenses for 3 to 6 months. Get a good average going. So that way you kind of know what to use. Once you have that information, then start plugging it down on paper and create categories. So again, if you could be as simple as essential, non-essential, savings. I mean, you could use those 3, or you can get very complicated. There's so many different budget plans out there. If you search the internet for budget examples, there's so many templates. I do have a very good one that I can send out. So if it's something that you want, I could get that out at the end of this presentation. That's very comprehensive. And it's a very nice, basically plug in all of your information. Create categories how you see fit. Like I said, track your income expenses, but save all your receipts. You know, I always gave my dad such a hard time. Hopefully he's not listening in on this one. And I always gave him such a hard time because he saved for every penny. He was an accountant, so he knew exactly where every cent was going. And, you know, I always kind of kid him about that, but you know what? He was able to retire when he was 55. So he had a budget together. They kept it. It was a family plan. I remember hearing my parents talk about, you know, we can't do this because we have this coming up. So again, you know, all the things that I probably criticized him for as as we all do as teenagers, he did it the right way. And he's going to be turning 70 this year. So he's been retired for a number of years already. And again, by keeping that personal budget. So again, we kind of sometimes take that for granted, but saving all of our receipts is so important. The other thing I do is when I talk to a lot of high school kids and I tell them to track their expenses and save their receipts, is that if you look at all those receipts, especially for my one daughter, again, bless her heart, but she spends a lot of her money on these shakes that are about $7 a piece. But if you think about it and you put it all down on paper, write out how much you actually spent on all those shakes, it's really an eye-opener to some of these kids, even to adults when we look at how much we've spent in eating out. Again, so those are all very important tips when you're building that personal budget. And again, it's going to take some homework. It's not something you can just do. I always say start by, again, sitting down and doing it again as a family or doing it as a family unit, because really you want everybody's kind of buy-in on it so everybody understands. You know, this is a simple one that I have put together, and this is how simple a budget can be. It can be simple as basically tracking your income, put your dates in there, what your budget, what your actual is, and your difference. And then again, writing down all of your expenses that you have every month. And I just gave a few examples here of an MDU, a City of Bismarck, an auto loan, and what your budget is and what your actual is. So it's that easy to do. Pen and paper, it's all you really need to get started. And again, there's so many different other tools online that you can use that are free. All right. Kind of preface this at the beginning of this, but one thing that we always have to remember is life changes. You know, things happen. Things happen in life. Divorce, death, you know, all those different things that happen. And so your life is not static. Your spending plan cannot be either. It really needs to change as your life changes. You know, you really should be reviewing your budget every 6 months and making sure you're still on the goal that you want. And again, everybody has different goals. We just need to make sure that it's working for us. And don't be afraid if all of a sudden, because something bad happens, that all of a sudden you have to completely change your mindset and change your budget. That's okay. Again, what is your end goal in mind? What are you really trying to save for? What are you really trying to budget? Again, loss of job, we've seen some of that even with the pandemic and that kind of stuff, and it's put people into a panic mode. But, you know, then there's decisions that also have to be made as far as, do we sell that new vehicle that we just bought, or do we really need that boat? Again, those all come down to wants and needs. You know, teaching kids about that is one thing, but as adults, we want things. You know, I like things. I like nice things. But we also have to make sure that we plan for the things that are coming up too, and some things that we don't plan for. So use an average of your monthly expenses and categorize all your expenses are such a good tool. And the last thing I want to end with is, and I always use this as kind of my, it's kind of some simple tips to save money. And it's really actually on the website that I found. It's Dave Ramsey, if you're familiar with him. And, you know, some of his teachings I agree with, some I don't. But we can kind of learn a lot from some of these experts. And sometimes I like to piecemeal some from different ones. But just want to share a few of these real quick. You know, say goodbye to debt. You know, one thing, like I said before, the best way to help our budget is to decrease those expenses or increase the income. Well, not all of us can increase our income. We can't all take on second or third jobs. We have a family at home. So the best way is to lower that debt. Well, the best way to do that is that snowball method. And if you might have heard of that before, but basically it kind of talks about taking the lowest debts first, paying those off. Then once you've paid those off, take those payments and roll it into your next payment. So like, for example, if you have an unsecured or a credit card that you're paying on, let's get rid of that. Once that's paid off, then let's take how much we are paying towards that credit card every month and put it towards that auto loan, or can we put it towards our mortgage? Believe how many times if we can just save, you know, put so much more dollars to our mortgage, how fast we can pay that off and how much interest we can save. So, and it's real dollars. Another one is cut down on groceries. They always say don't go grocery shopping hungry. I definitely agree with that. I never like to go to Walmart when I'm hungry. So it's too easy to buy the stuff we don't really need. So definitely use a list. You know, I see a lot of people when I'm shopping in Walmart, they have a grocery list. We do one. I do stray from it occasionally, which happens. But use a list. Keep track of what the other one is, don't be afraid to meal plan. We've done this though in the last few weeks. We've been busy with extracurricular activities at school, and you know, we've been starting to kind of plan out our meals every night, and that's such a stress relief when you can kind of know what you need to buy at the grocery store that weekend to plan for that next week. And you find that you're not having to say, okay, well, we're just going to swing through drive-through on the way home. It's just easier. Again, you save that much more money by doing that. The other thing that's becoming more popular is online grocery shopping or delivery. You know, that's an easy way probably to avoid some of those things you really don't need because it's probably a little harder to shop online and to look for that thing of Oreos or whatever it is. You're just buying the stuff that you really need and putting in your cart. So again, some of those things. We all like our entertainment. We like our Netflix. We like our Hulu, our gym memberships, all that kind of stuff. But make sure we're keeping track of all that stuff. You know, my wife and I were chatting not too long ago, and you start kind of adding all those things up. I mean, Apple Music and Netflix and Hulu. I mean, you start thinking about all those different things and how many times are you really using it? So you really have to make a decision as, do I really need it? You know, if we have Amazon, do we need to have Netflix also? Again, all life decisions, but again, they're all things that could save you money. This one talks about cuts ties with cable. We already talked about that. Reducing energy costs. I mentioned that a little bit as far as using a thermostat, a programmable one. But LED light bulbs are becoming kind of a big thing. They are a little more expensive, but I put some new ones and just true story, I put some new LED bulbs in my garage that I just kind of redid. And you know what? Already they've lasted so much longer than if just put in regular ones. They did cost me a little bit more, but in the long run, over time, it's going to be a money saver. Unsubscribe from emails. You know, everybody I know of is asking for your email address these days. And you know, you go to a retail store and Bath and Body Works, Victoria's Secret, all those other things. I haven't been into stores for a while now, but one of the things that they're always asking for those things. Why are they doing that? Because they're going to send you their specials. They're going to send you their weekly deals, whatever it is. But it all is temptation. And you know, I get a kick out of my wife because I know she subscribes to everything under the sun. But every time you get a email subscription because they have a sale at Dick's Sporting Goods, you know, it's that temptation to buy something. So if you want to try to save money, maybe it's a thing where you unsubscribe to these emails because then it's not hitting your inbox. It's not flooding you with all these great deals that are coming out, and especially once you get closer to the holiday season. Ask about discounts when you're paying with cash. I don't know if I don't have too much experience with that, but I know there is some places that if you're not doing financing and you're just going to pay cash up front, sometimes there's some better deals. They do give some other discounts around the area for seniors, students, teachers. Make sure you're asking those questions. If you're a AAA member, I know that there's some discounts out there too. Lower your cell phone bill. So this kind of goes back to the Midco thing, and there's different cell phone providers out there, and can you negotiate all those? Yeah, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, but it just seems like I've been dealing with Verizon on something right now where we kind of making some changes to our plan, and they're always trying to adjust and make differences, but you always want to make sure you know what you're paying for too. Is it stuff you need? Is it stuff you don't need? At one time I know our and again, we have a lot of kids in the house, but our cell phone bill was, upwards of $450. I mean, that's a lot of money. If you think about that over a year's time, we're throwing a lot of money at a cell phone. But now it's dropped below 400. So by making some small tweaks, you can make those changes and get some more savings. Two last ones I'm going to end with, and I mentioned this one before, but skip the coffee shop. My daughters love Starbucks, and so do all of us. But do we really need it? I know my daughter wanted to go this weekend. I did take one of them one day, and but you know what? How much that costs is remarkable. When I say we have coffee sitting right here, we can have. So again, it's one of those things that's kind of like a want versus a need. But again, it's all about choices. And then last one is staycation. We've heard that comment probably a few times. I know I've talked to many, even just today, about this, is that many of us are not taking vacations right now because we're a little scared to, or we just, you can't. So don't be afraid to take those staycations. I know I have one planned in October. I can't wait for it. Just having a week at home to maybe work on projects and stuff. But there's a lot of the things you can do as a family that you don't need to go to Disney World or do. You just got to make your fun on your own. I've seen a lot of advertisements now for like more of games, board games, and that kind of stuff. I mean, there's fun things you can do. But again, you got to get the whole family on board with it. So those are just some of my money saving tips. Again, those aren't all mine. Those are basically coming off a website I found, but hopefully that gave you a little bit of a instruction on putting together a budget. And again, we're at all different levels probably of how we track our expenses and our income. And but again, I can tell you this, it's so easy. Just take a piece of paper and pen out. It's all you need to do to get started. It's just taking the time to do it. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. If you have any on anything that I've covered today, or if we have the chat box open. Usually if I don't get any questions, that means I covered everything exactly right. So don't be afraid. One of the things we will do is we'll follow up with an email also on after the presentation. They'll have, I believe it'll have my contact information on it. So if it's something you would like to ask me personally, send me an email. Don't be afraid to reach out to me. Definitely help you get started. I also could send you a copy of that budget that I have put together. That's pretty comprehensive one, but it might be a good place for you to start. So. Right. I'm not seeing any questions come in, so I really appreciate you taking your 50 minutes with me today, and hopefully you have a great afternoon and happy budgeting. Thank you.